1995, interview with Erik Rosen. Before that, Rosenzweig. Interviewer Tina Tito. We're in Woodbury, New York, in the United States. The language will be English. Today is October 15th, 1995. The interview is with Mr. Erik Rosen, and I'm Tina Tito, the interviewer. Mr. Rosen, could you please tell us your full name and spell it for us?
Okay, my present name right now is Rosen, R-O-S-E-N.
Your first name?
Erik, E-R-I-K.
What were you when you were born?
Before I was born, it was Rosenzweig. It's R-O-S-E-N-Z-W-E-I-G.
Where were you born?
In Munich, Germany.
And when?
June 5, 1928.
Let's go to your father and his full name.
My father's, I remember his Jewish name was Shulam. Maybe now they call him Charles, I don't know.
Charles Rosenzweig. And was he also born in Munich?
No, my father was born in Katowice, Poland.
When did he get to Munich?
Well, as far as I can remember, before I was born, actually. I think right after First World War.
Did he ever tell you why he moved?
No, he just immigrated there and then happened to meet my mother there.
So he immigrated on his own, without his family?
No, without his family, right.
And your mother?
And my mother moved from Russia. My mother was born in Russia.
Where in Russia?
In Odessa. And she moved with her family to Munich. That's where she met my father.
What was your mother's full name?
Sarah.
And her maiden name?
Maiden name, it's Bogopolski. B-O-G-O-P-O-L-S-K-I.
And how did they meet?
That I can't remember that. I can't remember. I was too little too.
Okay. And when they were first married, do you know where they lived or what?
Well, my parents, when they got married, they had a couple of department stores in Munich.
What was the name of the department store?
That I don't know. Probably Rosenzweig. I don't know. I really can't remember.
Did they work together?
Yes, yes, they worked together.
Your mother helped your father out?
Yes.
Do you remember what they did? What were the specialties of your father and of your mother?
Well, I really don't know. They were both business people, you know, and all the children were born in Munich, 5 of them, including me.
Right, let's start with, you had an older sister?
I have an older sister. Unfortunately, she's not alive at present.
Her name was?
Frida.
When was she born, more or less?
More or less, I would say 1914. And then I had another brother. He was born in let's see, it's very hard to remember that right now. And a
couple of years later in the
couple of years later. I think a couple of years later.
And his full name?
His full name was Siegfried Rosenzweig.
And then you came?
And then one sister came. Her name was Erna Rosenzweig. I don't know her age, but she passed away last year at the age of 74. And after that came another brother. He's 8 years older than I am. I don't know, he must have been born in 1922, I think, or 1920.
His name?
Rosen.
So you were the baby?
And I was the baby.
How was the baby treated?
Like a prince.
Tell me your relationships with your brother and sister.
Well, my relationship was, well, I was the baby and I was pampered. You know, I had a good life. My parents were well-to-do in Germany.
Do you remember where you lived?
Yes, that I remember. I remember Rosenthal. Not too often, because I was very young. You know, when we had to leave Germany, I was 5 years old. So my memories are not that great about Germany.
All right, you were 5, so your siblings were older. What were they doing?
They went to school. They went to high school. My older sister helped in the store. My brothers went to high school.
Were they involved with the synagogue in the community?
Oh, yes, we were Orthodox too. We all went to synagogue.
Do you remember where the synagogue was?
No, no. Well, I found out later on because one of my oldest brother, when he took me to Germany, showed me where the synagogue was. And that's all I can remember.
Was it still there?
Right now, I think it was there about 10 years ago when I was there.
But it was in the community that you lived in?
In the community, right.
Now, was it a Jewish community that you were living in?
It was a Jewish community. Well, it was mixed probably. But where we lived, there was a synagogue. It did not look like a synagogue like they say in Yiddish probably, a stiebel, something like that. But inside it looked like a real synagogue.
Do you recall going to it?
Faintly, faintly.
Do you remember any holidays in your house?
Yes, I can remember a holiday. Like I said, not much. I was very, very young. I know my older sister used to bake and cook, help her mother get ready for the holidays. And that's all I know about Germany. I don't know too much about it.
Do you recall your house, the furnishings, your bedroom?
No, no. I only remember one thing, that in the courtyard where our house was located, there was a tower, the Tower of Munich. The German built it, was the Tower, but it was under our property. So I remember that tower. And when I used to go up to that tower, by not going there, somebody told me, if you go up there, the skeletons are going to eat you. So I was always afraid to go up there. And this thing stuck with me. It was a joke, you know.
Were you doing did you go to any religious teachings at this point at 5?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
And what was the first sign that you were going to move? You were very young.
I was very young. These things I cannot remember. Fortunately, my oldest brothers and sisters, they knew the situation. They knew that Hitler was going to come and things are going to go bad. And I was a child. I was 5 years old. I don't know. I went wherever my parents went. I went with them. Right. I know we left. We had to leave Germany, and that's.
Well, okay, so let's talk about the path you took. You decided, in what year did your parents decide to leave Germany?
We left Germany, I believe, in 1932, 32 or 33.
So just as Hitler came to power?
Just as Hitler came to power.
Your father understood that things were going to go badly?
Well, the thing what happened before that, I don't know exactly when. My parents were separated. And my father moved back to Poland. And he went back to Katowice. So my mother was left with the 5 children.
Could she support you?
Yes, because we still were well-to-do. We still had my mother still had some income, and it wasn't that difficult.
And she had her parents around her, her family?
She had her mother.
Her father had died?
Her father had passed away, yes. He passed away in Munich. And she had her mother.
Living near her?
I believe so, yes. Well, in a Jewish community, everybody lived close together. Nobody was far away like now.
So in 1932,
1932,
she was packing you up to leave.
Right. We packed and everybody left. Well, in between, my older sister got married. My older sister got married in Munich. So when we had to leave Germany, my older sister and her husband remained in Munich.
Did your father come back for the wedding? Was he part of the wedding?
I don't think so. I can't remember, but I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
And who did your sister marry? Do you remember his name?
Yes, his name was Jacob Bleckner. And that's all I can remember.
So she now was not living in the house with you?
She was not living in the house. She was married. And I had my 2 brothers, and my other sister also got married.
Erna got married.
Erna got married because from Munich, when we left Munich, we went to Berlin. In Berlin, we stayed maybe about a year.
Now, did your sisters follow?
One sister remained in Munich.
Which one?
Frida remained in Munich, and we all went to Berlin. And in Berlin, my other sister got married. She married an owner of a cigarette factory, very well-to-do. And they remained in Berlin. And as far as I can remember, it got pretty bad in Berlin also, just like in Munich. It didn't change.
By the end of 1933.
The whole Germany was an upheaval against the Jews. So we all decided to go to Italy.
Now, who is all?
My sister Erna, who got married in Berlin, my two brothers and I, and my mother. We went to Berlin, to Italy. We went to Milan, and we stayed in Milan, I would say maybe 6 or 8 months. But as I said, I was still a young child. I don't remember too much. My mother decided to move to Palestine. This is the country that Israel was then called Palestine. And we could not emigrate to Palestine because immigration was not allowed. British did not allow Jews to emigrate. So we went to Palestine just to visit, as a visitor. And in order to get there, we had to leave a deposit, money deposit with the British. That's the only time that, only way it was possible to go to Palestine.
Was your mother always a Zionist? Or did she feel...
No, she felt like going to Palestine. She felt this is a place where Jews lived. That was a historical homeland, and that's the way to go, is to go to Palestine. So we all went to Palestine. We arrived in Palestine as visitors. But the transition from Germany into Palestine, my parents lost a lot of money, and times were starting to get very, very difficult then. So when we arrived in Palestine, my mother had to make a living, support the children. So she opened up a small restaurant in a private home for workers who at the time were Zionists, were starting to build up Israel, trying to build roads in Tel Aviv. And when it came for lunchtime, they came to my mother to have lunch. And my mother worked very hard in the kitchen and so forth. She saved a lot of money, and she invested it to buy land. That land was fraudulent, and she lost it all. And my mother lost her nerves, and she said, this is not the place. And she decided to go back to Europe. We then didn't know what we went into. It was 1936. We went back to Europe. And my grandmother remained in Tel Aviv. My mother also had 2 brothers and 2 sisters who also immigrated to Palestine from different parts of Germany because they were married. And one sister of my mother told her, you have to leave one son, at least one son with us. So she left the middle brother, Rosen. He stayed in Israel. I went back with my mother and my oldest brother, Siegfried. We went back to Italy.
And Erna, where was she at this point?
Erna lived also in Italy. We went back because when we went to Israel, Erna and her husband remained in Italy. They did not go to Palestine with us. So when we went back to Italy, my sister was there.
So you went back to Milan?
We went back to Milan, and we spent 2 years in Milan, and then we went to San Remo on the Italian Riviera. But then the unfortunate thing happened that Mussolini, the dictator of Italy, made a pact with Hitler, and you made a pact with the devil, and the devil says to Mussolini, you have to get rid of the Jews. And my mother decided it's time to leave Italy. Where else can we go, which is free of Germans or Nazi or fascists, is France, which was next door to San Remo. We went to Nice. Between Nice and San Remo, it's only about 2-hour drive. So we arrived in Nice in 1938. 1938, I was 10 years old. My brother had to make a living, was a salesman. I went to public school, elementary school still. My mother did what she did before in Israel, open up a restaurant. And she did the same thing, made a living cooking for other people. That was from 1938 till 1942.
Did you belong to a synagogue there?
Yes, we went to, we called it the Polish synagogue at the Boulevard du Bouchage, which was not far away from Boulevard Victor Hugo. Now it's called, it has a different name now. And I went to school. I went to Hebrew school there, took Hebrew lessons. And Hebrew lessons started to get very, very difficult, so we had to get private lessons. And it wasn't easy for my mother to pay the teacher in money, so she paid him in food, kilo of sugar there and loaf of bread there. And that's how I had my Hebrew education, especially get ready for Bar Mitzvah.
Just before, do you remember where you lived in Nice?
In Nice, I lived, well, different addresses. In the Rue de France. Then we moved to Rue Masséna. And those are the two places that we lived in.
Fine. And now for your bar mitzvah.
The bar mitzvah well, I can never forget that bar mitzvah because when I was 13, ready to have bar mitzvah was not possible because we had anti-Semitism, not by the Germans, because France was still free France at the time, but the French fascists. They made it very difficult for me to have bar mitzvah at the age of 13. I had bar mitzvah at the age of 14 because the French didn't let me.
What do you mean by, what did they do? What could they do?
Stoning synagogues, make it very, very difficult. I mean, you could not go to synagogue free as before. It was not the same thing, not the same thing. I had bar mitzvah at the age of 14.
1942.
That was in just about 1942. And the day of my bar mitzvah, the French fascists came and smashed all the windows in the synagogue. This was an experience that's staying with me up to today. You know.
Was the synagogue full?
The synagogue was full, yes.
So the Jews, despite what the French were doing, were still going to synagogue?
They were still going to synagogue.
They weren't discouraged by what they were doing?
No, we had to go to synagogue. It was Shabbat, we had to go to synagogue. They didn't do that every Saturday, but just that Saturday when I had bar mitzvah, that's when they broke the windows. They didn't do it the following or the week before, just my luck. Just that day when I had bar mitzvah, they broke the windows.
So did you get bar mitzvah that day?
Yes, I did. I did finish it.
People stayed, no matter what was happening?
No, they stayed. They stayed. We stayed. I mean, they came, I don't know who that was, the French militia that threw stones at the window and ran away. But then the services continued.
Very strong.
Yes, yes, yes.
So what happened after this point? From the time of your bar mitzvah, we're now 1942?
That was in 1942.
Is your mother in contact with Frida? She's
Oh,
now
yes,
still in Germany?
Yes, yeah. No, my Frida lived, my sister lived in Switzerland.
In Switzerland.
In Switzerland. They moved from Munich in 1938. They stayed in Germany till the last minute. 1938 was very, very difficult already for a Jew to stay in Germany. And they decided to move to Switzerland.
Now, did she have children?
Well, I have to recant that story. When my sister lived in Munich and my mother and I lived in Nice, she kept on telling my sister, it's very dangerous to stay in Munich. You got to come to Nice. Nice is free and there are no Germans. You got to come down. Finally, my sister decided to come down to Nice. They packed a suitcase. But from Munich to Nice, they had to go through Zurich, through Switzerland. The day they arrived in Switzerland, the war broke out. They closed all the frontiers, and they got stuck in Switzerland. They couldn't move in, couldn't move out, and they stayed there. They were refugees in Switzerland.
But they let them stay?
They let them stay. He was in a I think they put him in a camp, not a camp, in I don't know.
Internment.
Like an internment. Okay. Later on, they let him go out, and he remained all those years in Switzerland.
And the internment camp was in Geneva?
No, that was someplace in outside of Zurich. That I can't remember where. But my sister and her husband remained in Switzerland during the war, after the war, and they were never Swiss citizens. But the children were Swiss citizens. They had two children, a boy and a girl. They always stayed in Switzerland. Even my nephew and niece are living in Switzerland right now. Mm-hmm. But my sister passed away, and so did my brother-in-law. You know,
okay.
It's life.
Right. So now you're back in Nice.
I'm back in Nice.
And your other sisters in Milan still?
My sister in Milan also went to Nice with us.
So she finally came?
She came to Nice, yes, came to Nice.
So
and
did she have children at this point when she came to Nice?
Yes, she had 2 children that were born in Italy, in Milan, and 3 children that were born in France.
And 3 in France. Now, what happened in 1942? How were your life?
1942, my mother decided to go to Switzerland to seek refuge, because in 1942, the reason that we had to leave Nice, we feared that the Germans were going to come down south, because in 1942, Italy capitulated. And we knew that the Gestapo and the Germans, everybody's going to come down and they're going to start rounding up the Jews. And we decided to leave. My sister, who was in Nice with us, she decided to stay, to go into hiding. My mother decided, let's go to Zurich to see my sister who lives there, and we might be saved in Switzerland. So we got false passports, and we went over the mountains into Geneva.
You walked out? This was a trek that you made?
We took a train till the border, and from the border into Switzerland, we went by foot over the mountains, my mother and I. And
your brother, Siegfried?
My brother Siegfried, well, this is something that happened before. When my mother had the restaurant in beginning of 1942, she sent my brother to the mountains to buy vegetables. On the way back, he got stopped by the French police. They wanted to know what he had in the back of the bicycle, in a little basket. They were vegetables, naturally. He bought them at the black market, which is against the law. Petty vegetables, some carrots, onions, whatever. They arrested him, took him to jail, and then they took him outside of Nice into a bigger prison. And that was it. That was the end of my brother.
So you hadn't seen him from 1941?
I haven't seen him, and they sent him to a camp at the time that was called Rivsalt. And from Rivsalt, they sent him to a camp by the name of Gers. And from Gers, the French turned him over to the Germans, sent him to a concentration camp outside of Paris, and from there he went to Auschwitz. And I have documents that mention that as soon as he arrives in Auschwitz, him and his convoy should be gassed immediately.
And you have these documents?
I have these documents. I got these in Paris.
They kept a very good
the French, the Germans kept very good papers, and they have very, very good archives, and all those were found, actually. They were found, thank God, by a fantastic man by the name of Serge Klausfeld. He did everything possible to save those documents, and they're right now in the archives in Paris.
So that's how you were able to trace what happened?
That's why I'm able to trace my brother's whereabouts and fate.
Okay, so we're now back in 1942. You're now in Switzerland?
1942, we were going over the mountains, and we were stopped by a Swiss border guard. The Swiss border guard knew what was going on in France. He took us to a camp in Geneva. And we arrived in a camp. The camp was full of Jews from different parts of France or Italy. And the Swiss never let, for some reason or another, never let my mother call her daughter, who lives in Zurich, to let her know that we are saved in Geneva. She should come down and try to get us. I just, till today, I cannot understand why they did not let my sister be contacted. One day they put us in a car. And we thought maybe we're going to Zurich. I don't know, something happened. Then all of us, I didn't pay any attention, but all of a sudden my mother recognized a French gendarme. And my mother, you know, like a Jewish woman, she says, "Oy vey, the French." They sent us back into France. And we spent the night in jail. The next day they put us on a train and we arrived in Gurs.
So this is still 1942.
This is 1942.
And you're in Gurs now. But your brother is already past Gurs, so he's no longer there.
My brother was taken. He was in a French jail someplace. My mother never found out where he was, what happened, which was very difficult for my mother. It was her oldest son. And we were in Gurs.
And your sister never realized you ever arrived in Switzerland?
No, my sister never knew that we were in Geneva. She never knew that.
So the Swiss contacted the French and said, take your people back, obviously.
Take them back.
Although you weren't French citizens either.
No, no. I don't know if they contacted them. They just put us in a car and sent us over to the French border. Okay. And the French took over.
Fine. We'll stop the tape here now, and girls, we'll continue. Thank you. Erik Rosen, October 15th, 1995. You're back in France?
I'm back in France. I'm in Gurs. Well, that I can remember. It was a pitiful camp.
How did you get back there? How did they take you? What transport?
I only know when they took us over, when the Swiss took us over the border. We went by train. And one day we arrived in Gurs.
With the train?
Straight to Gurs. Straight to Gurs. And it was a dreadful place.
Describe it. Give me an idea of what it's like.
I just saw some barracks.
Was it an army barrack originally, or?
I don't know. It was a lot of mud. Everything was wet. I mean, it's not like something. There were streets. There were no streets, nothing paved. It was just like an open field, dirty, muddy, with some barracks. And I can remember the barracks. There are no beds on the barracks. People just slept on the floor.
Were they built up?
No, no, just plain on the floor, the way I can remember it. I think there were mattresses on the floor. Each person had a mattress. And I was there with my mother.
You weren't separated? You were together?
No, I was together.
How many people in a barrack?
Oh, that's hard to say. There were quite a few people.
You were crowded in?
It was crowded. It was crowded. It was pretty crowded.
Basically,
it was a long barrack. It was crowded.
Immigrants, basically French. Who was there?
French. It can be anything but Jews from different places, you know.
There were Jews from different places collected at this point.
Collected. It was a collection camp.
And this was at the base of the Pyrenees?
That was at the base of the Pyrenees, because I can remember all those guards and those who did the kitchen. There was a lot of Spanish spoken there. Basque, Spanish. There were a lot of gypsies. I think there were also prisoners, but they had better position than we had.
What does that mean?
Well, they were taking care of the kitchen, taking care of the cleaning, and they were better off than we were.
What were the Jews asked to do?
I can't remember. We were just doing nothing.
They just made you sit there?
Made us sit there. There was nothing to do. It was just plain open. There was nothing, no industry, nothing. It was just like an open football field. Muddy, dirty, with some barracks. and the Jews were in those barracks.
Now, you were 14 at this point.
I was 14.
And you've been moved around an awful lot.
Yes.
How are you dealing with this? What was going on inside of you?
Well, at 14, I was still a child. I don't know. I didn't realize how cruel and difficult everything was. Everything came out 50 years later, all in one shot, which is very, very heavy. And it's hard to cope right now with this. Then was a different story.
You were living it.
I was living it. I just didn't realize. My mother, naturally, she knew.
How was she acting? She also had been through so much.
She was a fantastic woman. She always kept high spirits. She was something. You know, everybody, every Jewish fellow who is Orthodox or non-Orthodox, who understands to speak Yiddish, everyone called their mother a Yiddish mama, you know, and that's every mother was a good Yiddish mama.
So she really gave you strength.
She gave me strength. She gave me strength.
Now, did you speak Yiddish together?
No, German.
German. Did you understand Yiddish?
Yes, but the German type of Yiddish. There's a lot of Yiddish dialects. I spoke the German Yiddish.
So, but it was a German Yiddish.
A German Yiddish, yes. But with my mother, I only spoke German.
Okay.
I only spoke German.
Fine. And in France as well, it was even in this place, you communicated in German?
In German, always in German.
Okay.
Always in German.
Was she able to talk with the guards? Were the guards French or German?
No, they were French. There were no Germans there.
At that point?
No, there were no Germans.
How were they treating you, the French?
Well, the atmosphere was pitiful there, and they didn't beat us or anything or slave labor like we found out later on the Germans did. But the German guards, the French guards were just guards. They were guarding us, and that's it.
Food? What kind of food?
I can't remember. I don't think it could have been too good, you know.
Were people sick?
I can't remember that either. I'm pretty sure it was, because I heard from other conversation from other people who were older than I am then, that there were sick people there also.
Was your mother able to communicate with her daughters at this point?
No, we were not able to communicate.
Isolated?
Isolated. Nobody knew where we were. Nobody knew where we were. But a funny thing happened. I don't know what was the reason for. They didn't keep children. They did not keep children because one day, at the age of 14, they let me go. And I was, in a way, happy to leave. And I didn't know if I was unhappy or not to leave my mother alone. But I was able to leave because I had a sister living in Nice still. So they let me go because at 14 I was still a child, and I arrived in Nice. I arrived in Nice where my sister and her husband were waiting for me, and they took me into their home, and I stayed with them.
And your mother wanted you to go?
My mother wanted me to go. My mother wanted to have a better life than she had then, so she let me go. Well, I don't know if she let me go. She had to let me go because they were not keeping children there. They were only keeping adults.
But she made it easy for you.
She made it easy for me to go. I can go back to Nice. I can stay with my sister and so forth. And maybe one day it'll be better. She'll come to join us. I mean, those were the hopes that we had then, that my mother will be able to be freed from Gers and she's going to come to Nice later on. So I went back to Nice. Naturally, Nice was occupied by the Italian authorities. The Italian authorities, even though they were fascist, were not as mean as the German. They were tolerant. They didn't persecute. They knew what was going on, but they were nice. They were tolerant. And my brother-in-law had an idea that if I go to see the military governor of Nice, the Italian military governor, and plead with him that I would like to have my mother, that I should put on an act, I should cry, I'm alone, I'm 14 years old, I want my mother back. And this governor, military governor, I think he was a general, he told me that he will try to do what he can. And this man did whatever he could. One day, my brother-in-law got a notification that, that he intervened in my behalf and they freed my mother. This general, after the war, was arrested because he was an Italian enemy and he was put on trial. I testified on his behalf, what he did for my mother.
In Italy?
In Nice.
In Nice.
In Nice, after the war, and they freed him.
Were there others like you that he helped?
I don't know. I only know about my case. I only told the court that this general made everything possible for my mother to come back to Nice.
So now you were living with your sister and your mother was there?
And sister, my mother. My sister, when I went back to Nice, my sister decided to go into hiding.
This is now late 1942?
It was already beginning 1943. My sister decided to go into hiding. My sister, I think, got in touch with an organization called OSE, which is the Œuvre Secours des Enfants, which is something that, it's a children's organization. I got in touch with him, and they sent me someplace into a ceramic farm outside of Nice. They gave me false papers, and they changed my name from a Jewish name, Rosenzweig, to a French name. So from Rosenzweig, I was given identity papers by the name of Rosnot, R-O-S-N-O-T, and instead of Erik, I became Henri. So my name was Henri Rosnot. And I was in that camp, not a camp, in this farm, which is a ceramic school, where you learn to be ceramic maker. And one day I decided, let me see if I can just remember. My mother was free, she went back to Nice, and then I went into hiding.
Your sister was in hiding?
My sister was in hiding.
Where were her children?
Her children were given away. They were given away to different Catholic families.
5?
5 children, yes, 5 small children. I don't know the age, but they were very small, very small.
And your brother-in-law, her husband?
My brother and her husband, they went into hiding.
They went together?
They went together, they went to hiding.
Where did they hide, do you know?
I don't know, someplace in the mountain, outside of Nice. There was a place to hide. That I can't remember. That I cannot remember.
So your mother was now, again, alone in Nice?
My mother was alone. I was alone in Nice. When my mother came back, I was sitting away in that ceramic farm. My mother was living in Nice. And then one day, from that ceramic farm, I decided to go into Nice, into an office that was run by Jews, where they give false identity papers and so forth. I went in there just to show myself. I didn't know that about a week or so before it was taken by the Gestapo, and they were hiding. So everybody that walked in there was arrested. Naturally, I didn't speak German, I spoke French. My name is Henri Rosnot. I showed my false identity papers, and he pointed to me in German, which I understood, but I made believe I don't know. Take my pants down. And they saw that I was circumcised. That was it.
Now,
So
why did you go there, since you had the papers already?
I had the papers already, but this was like a meeting place, like a Jewish committee. They were there running the place, helping Jews, trying to get them. It was like a clandestine organization. How the Germans found out that there were Jews in that building, I don't know. Maybe somebody denounced them, which is very possible. I only knew, if I knew that they were there, I would never gone there. I went there and I was arrested. And
You had no contact? You couldn't tell your mother? I mean, that was it?
No, my mother was waiting for me. She knew she lived in Nice, and I wanted to visit her. And before going to visit her, I went into this place. If I would have seen my mother first, she probably would have told me, don't go there. But I went there first and I was arrested. My mother never saw me again. Madam, she never saw me again.
Where did they take you?
They took me to a hotel not far from the train station where they were rounding up all the Jews till they get about 100 people. It was a hotel, Excelsior. And
Then what did they do with you?
they kept me there, and I was interrogated by an officer. I found out later on it was an officer by the name of Brunner, Aloysius Brunner, Hauptstammführer Brunner. He asked me right away where my mother was. I said, I don't know. Where my father is, I said, I don't know. They said, you're lying, and he hit me till I fell on the floor one day. He hit me real hard. And my father was already living in Poland then, but they did not pursue to find out where my mother was. If they would have tortured me, maybe I would have told them, I don't know, but they didn't. I just stayed in that hotel for 1 week, till they had about 100 people. When they had 100 people, we went across the street to the train station, and we went overnight. We didn't know where, but then we found out we arrived in Paris. And from Paris, we went to a camp called Drancy. I arrived in Drancy. That camp was completely empty, and I couldn't understand why it was empty. Then I found out, well, there was a convoy that left a day before. We didn't know where it was going to.
When did you arrive? Do you remember?
I arrived, I would say, in October 1943. So we were in Drancy, we were in a barrack.
Was it like Gros?
No, 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 no. This was it was a compound, like a U-shaped compound. It was, I believe it was a low-cost housing for French people. I don't know, they evacuated that place and they put us up. They put up all the Jews. I mean, the Germans requisitioned this compound, and they rounded up all the Jews, and they stayed there until you get about 1,000 or 1,400 people. So it took about 3 weeks.
You just sat there?
We just sat there, we didn't do anything.
Again, fed poorly?
We were fed poorly. We were fed very, very poorly. And sleeping naturally on the floor. The courtyard was also very muddy and dirty.
Were you scared? You were alone now.
I was alone. I still, I don't know. I didn't comprehend then, you know. I just didn't comprehend. By then I was 15 years old already, and I just didn't comprehend. I wasn't too scared because I was with other people. I was with other Jews.
Did they take care of you?
No, no, no. But it wasn't so bad. I mean, you know. And the funny thing is, there was a synagogue there. They put a synagogue up in the middle, so we know there was a synagogue. So we went to synagogue. And we had our 3 meals a day, you know, bread and some soup, and then that was it. And 3 weeks went by until one day we were told we are moving. So we moved under the direction of French gendarmes. Maybe a couple of Germans were there, but everything was done by the French. There were no German presence. I happened to see Brunner again in a German uniform. When he interrogated me in Nice, he had civilian clothes. But in Drancy, I saw him in a full dress SS uniform. He recognized me, and he didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. I didn't know he knew where we were going. He knew that. He knew that. He was a dreadful person. And one day we left, the convoy left by foot to a train station. We went to the train station, and what we saw was maybe a dozen or two cattle cars, closed-gun cattle cars. We went into those cattle cars, and the convoy left. I don't know how
Men, women, and children.
Men, women, and children.
Young, old.
Young, old. We just put maybe 50, 60 in a cattle car, and the cattle car left. The convoy left. 2, 3 days. And until we arrived into a place that a lot of people will never forget. There was a sign that says Arbeit macht frei. We still didn't know what it meant, where we were. We didn't know it was Auschwitz, you know.
This is now November 43.
End of October, November 1943. Started to get very cold there, you know. We knew we were in Poland. We knew we were in Poland. Because we had a way of finding out. As the train left France, we knew exactly we were in Germany. And we saw, looking out through the little barbed wire cubby holes, you know, German stops. Then all of a sudden, Polish stops, Polish names. Then somebody said, we are in Poland. But
you had your own clothes on, so you...
We had our own clothes on.
So relatively warm at this point.
We had our own, I had my own clothes on. Wasn't that bad. Wasn't that bad. But then we arrived in a place that we found out was Auschwitz. And then it was a different story altogether.
You got out of the cattle car. What did you see? What was the impact?
The impact, the doors open up, and some people, I saw people, the first thing that I saw was some men, they had a uniform, they had something on there, was blue and white stripes. And they had a hat, blue and white. We didn't know what that meant, what it was. But some of them had some, what do you call it, like rubber truncheon, like pieces of hoses. And they kept on yelling, raus, raus, raus. Those who didn't go fast enough, they were hit on the legs. And we had to descend the cattle car and line up.
Day, night?
I think we arrived there during the daytime. It was daytime. And we had to line up. And there was a long column. And then I saw there were 2 columns, one on one side, one on the other. And then I was not at the head of the column. I must have been in the middle of the column. But I saw that the column was little by little going forward. By the time we got forward, we saw some SS people, some in SS uniform. And they looked at us. They say, over here. The other guy looked at me, he says, go over here. We had no idea what this means or what that means, you know. And after we were all separated, we were marched into Auschwitz. Because where they separated us was still at the train station. Then they marched us inside of the camp.
Was it far?
No, no, no. I think the last stop was already inside of the camp. The railroad went right inside of the camp. So they marched us down, and as far as I remember, we arrived in a barrack, and I think the next day in the morning, we spent the night there. They gave us some food. We spent the night there. The next morning, we had to take off all our clothes. After our clothes, they sent us to take a shower. We took a shower. I did not know what the shower meant. I know now, but thank God we were lucky. This was just a shower. And they gave us some clothes, and those clothes were the same ones that I saw before, blue and white uniforms.
What was on your feet?
On my feet, I had my shoes. They gave us some shoes. Now, those shoes were wooden shoes, you know. And one thing we know, we had to take, after they gave us the clothes and we put them on, we had to roll up our sleeve, and there were some inmates with some pointy pens, and they kept on tattooing me on the left arm. I did not know what it was, and it was with ink. And that ink, looking at that ink was still wet. And I thought, it has to dry. Somebody says, don't dry, wipe it right off. So when I wiped it off, the ink went away, but all of a sudden I saw that number on my arm. So I had a number.
Can you read the number to us, please?
It was 159754. I had this number on. The next station was, they shaved our heads. So we shaved completely. All of a sudden I saw myself in a uniform, blue-white striped uniform, a tattoo on my arm, and no hair on my head. And it looked strange, but I had no fear then. I don't know why I had no fear. It was like, it didn't exist. I don't know, there's no explanation. No explanation. They put us in one of the barracks, and they gave us some food. The food was a slice of bread with 1 cube of margarine, and I think it was like green pea soup. That was it. I think the next morning, they called us down, they put us on a truck. In that truck were maybe 15 inmates, me and 14 others.
They called you by number?
They called by number. There were no more names. Everything was a number. I think I was told, you have no more name, you have to remember your number. This is your number. So they called this number, and they put us on a truck. With that truck were 2 SS guards in back of the truck with machine gun or rifles. That's immaterial. And the truck went for about a day until we arrived in a camp. We saw the camp by going down the hill, and it was barbed wires all around it and a big portal that opened up, and the truck went inside, and we got off. And this was a dreadful time for us, because whoever was in charge, the people who called capos.
Who were the capos?
Capo are like supervisors, but those capos were not Jewish. Those capos were German criminals who were sentenced to life in prison by the German government for robbery or whatever.
How did you know that? How did you know they were? Did they have a different mark on them?
They had I found that out later, because the Jews had a mark. They had red with yellow. Those who were not Jewish had red and green. And some of them just had a triangle in green, so we knew that when they had a triangle in green, they were not Jewish. And the others who had it in red, I think, were Polish. There were different identifications. And some of them were pretty bad. We did not see any Germans. The minute we were in the camp, we were in the control of those capos.
What camp were you in?
This was a satellite. Well, I didn't know then it was a satellite. It was a camp. I found out it was Janina. And I think it was late in the afternoon. And then they put me in one of the barracks with other people. And then that was the first time at the age of 15 that I started to cry, that I didn't know what happened to me. And I cried for my mother. I never cried before, because I just, all of a sudden, I was with other people. They had those uniforms on, and they put me in one of those bunk beds all the way up on top. Everybody spoke a language which I didn't understand, which I found out later on was Polish, but I'm French, French, German, that's the language I knew. This was a funny language, but then some of them spoke Yiddish. Then I understood, they spoke Yiddish, and they asked me questions that they wanted to know where I'm from and with this and that.
Were you one of the youngest there?
I was one of the youngest there, yes. I was the youngest. I was the youngest, and the funny thing is they used to call me Fräulein Rosenzweig.
Why?
Because I was the youngest.
Because, oh, you were a child. You were like
I
a
was
little
a
girl.
child, okay, because I was a child. And because I was a child, I got a job working in the kitchen.
Okay, we're going to stop the tape, and then we'll talk about that in the
Okay.
next tape. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Rosen, October 15th, 1995. We left you in Yanina, ready to go to work.
Well, I was in Yanina. They put me in the kitchen. They gave me a job in the kitchen. Kitchen wasn't bad. There was food there. I had to clean up the, how you call it, the pot where they cook the food. Whatever I was able to scrape from the big pot and put it in my mouth, there was nourishment. So it wasn't so bad for a while. Until one day, the kitchen supervisor, who was one of the capos, not an SS man, one of the capos, saw that I had dirt on my head. Dirt on my head, how it got there, I don't know. He says I didn't wash it enough, I didn't scrub it enough. I got fired. All right, I got fired. I got fired. I think 1 day or 2 days later, they sent me into a coal mine with the others. Well, I knew when I worked in the kitchen that this camp was in the vicinity of a coal mine. That I saw people go there in the morning in a convoy with SS guards, and they were marching maybe a mile and a half towards the coal mine, which we were able to see from our camp. So after I got fired, I also went into the coal mine.
This is winter now, December
This is like December or January.
of 44?
Or 43.
Well, January 44.
January 44.
All right. And you're wearing just the stripe, but did they give you warmer clothing?
No. I had a coat, and I had those wooden shoes, and I had my underwear, and I had my uniform. Everything was striped. Even your underwear was striped. You had like long underwear, but not white striped, very, very thin stripes. Only your outside uniform were very, very wide stripes.
When they gave you the pajamas or the outfit, they also gave you utensils to eat?
They gave you, as I believe, they only gave you a spoon. That's all you got. That was your spoon. But a lot of them, hammered the other end of the spoon to make a knife out of it. Because when they gave you a piece of bread, you had to cut it. Or you had to spread that bit of margarine that they gave you. So a lot of people did that. It was illegal. Sometimes it was taken away, and we were given another spoon, so we did the same thing all over again, But when I arrived in the mine, in a coal mine, that was bad. Coal mine was bad. That was a bad job for me.
Did you go very, very
Yeah, you had to take like an elevator and go all the way down. I don't know how far deep it was. It was down. It was a miserable place. They had little tunnels. You had to shovel coal. They gave me a shovel. That was a wide shovel like that. I've never seen a shovel that wide. And if you put a little coal on it, and just say, hey, this is not it. You got to fill up the whole shovel with coal. Go lift up a shovel like that. Schoolboy, 15 years old. I couldn't lift it. I was reported by the Poles. And
Polish Jews?
no, by the Poles who
Capos,
no, from the Poles for the civilians.
Uh-huh.
Because when you went into a mine, you were working with Poles, Christian, Polish coal miners. Each coal miner was assigned a helper. And if I was not satisfactory to that coal miner, he reported me. Hey, you gave me somebody, this guy's no good. So when the Germans found out about that, I got beaten up. But I had to go back again with the same with the same coal miner. I had to lift up, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. And
How long were you there?
I did this for about a year and a half. Did this for about a year and a half.
Were you getting sick, weak? What was your state of
Well,
health?
I don't know. Well, here is a, I think when I did this after the first or second week, I just couldn't take it. I couldn't take it because it was impossible. I couldn't shovel anymore. I was exhausted at night, and I says, I'm not going to do it anymore. So I tried to commit suicide. I went into the bathroom when there was nobody there. I took the string that was holding my pants and tied it around my neck, and the other end at the faucet. It wasn't a high fall, it was a low faucet, but I let myself slide down so it should choke me. And it started to choke me, but one inmate passed by that bathroom and he saw me and he started yelling. So they came in and they cut the rope. One of them called the SS commandant that there is one inmate tried to commit suicide. And I got a nice beating. And I remember what he said, I'm sabotaging the war effort. So I got a nice beating. And they sent me back to the coal mine again.
And you resisted. You did.
I had to do what I'm going to do. I tried that once. I didn't know, am I going to try it again? But I did it.
Were there other people that felt like that? That they
I
just
don't
couldn't
know.
anymore?
I don't know.
You know of cases? Or
I don't know of any case. I only know about my case that after I got that beating up, and I went back to the coal mine. But I still do not understand the German mentality. Here they had a camp where they were working people to death. People were dying because we saw corpses in a courtyard. But they had a hospital. They had a dental clinic.
the inmates went to?
Yes. Now I cannot realize, how is this possible? They were working people to death. And after they were sick, they were sent back to Auschwitz and they were gassed. But in the camp, they had a hospital. Hospital had sheets and pillowcases and blankets. And they had a doctor. And his name was Dr. Erik. And I think he's the one that called me Fräulein Rosenzweig. He was a Czech doctor.
Jewish?
Jewish. He happened to be a physician. He was also there. They gave him a job as a doctor, and he was good to me.
Yeah.
Whatever he had a chance to do, take me into that hospital, to let me sleep a night or two in that bed. He gave an excuse, I had this. I did have a bad back. So what they did, they put me on a bed, they turned me on my stomach. They put a piece of round wood with a lot of lamps inside, put a blanket over it, keep me warm. Today I cannot understand, why is it possible? How did they do that? I mean, killing people at one end and having a hospital in the other. The other one was when I had a toothache. I went to the dentist and he yanked my tooth. They had a dental stool and they had every utensil, and the dentist was a French dentist.
Jewish again?
Jewish again. Dr. Brody. He is not alive anymore, but I think his son is also a dentist. He's alive, living in Paris. But life was harsh in that camp also. It's not only that we had to work. In the middle of the night, they got us out of bed. We had to go in the courtyard, like February, March, 1 or 2 feet of snow. We had to run, lay down, run, lay down, run, lay down in the snow. And those who couldn't keep up, they were beaten. Not by the German, by those capos. Just for the whim of it. We had to do that practically every second day. And we had no holidays. There was no Saturday, there was no Sunday. It was 7 days a week for a year and a half. How I survived that, I don't know. A lot of them survived, a lot of them didn't. A lot of them didn't. Or I would say maybe every 2 months or so, some SS big shots came from Auschwitz. We had to line up. They looked us over like cattle, you know, if we are fit or we're not fit. If this guy felt like he's not fit, he went back to Auschwitz, to a gas chamber, naturally.
I'm sorry, did they have the appel every morning too? Or
they have an appel every morning. Every morning they had an appel. And there were rows of 5 or 6. And if that line was not as straight like a needle, or somebody was out 1/8 of an inch, the assessment came and he whapped you once across the face, that the stars were starting to fly all over your head. That's how it was. The appel was very bad in the morning, 3:30 in the morning.
And when you got back at night?
We got back at night, well, there was a count. When we entered the camp, there were 2 SS and they counted us.
Anybody escape ever?
Yes. But it's funny, this Dr. Orlik, he was like a god. I don't know, he was a fantastic person. When the big shots came from Auschwitz to look us over, he made sure I was in a hospital. And when they asked him what I'm doing in the hospital, oh, he's just got a little injury on his toe. That means I'm still able to work.
Were you the youngest in this whole place?
I was the youngest.
So you were his baby.
I was his baby. He was a good man. He was a good man. And he did everything possible. He survived, was a physician in Canada, and I went to visit him. But he passed away also, like natural causes. But he helped a lot. He kept me alive.
What happened after this point?
After this point, well, I did this for a year and a half. Until one day, I mean, there are news that they're seeping into the camp. We knew there was an invasion. Americans invaded France. And then one day we heard bombardments, like from far away distance. And, you know, people are talking, you know, like the capos who are not Jewish. They must have gotten some news from coal miners that the Russians are not too far away, January 1945. So they decided to evacuate the camp. So they evacuated the camp and we left Janina.
In January 1945?
In January 1945.
This was the death march?
No.
No.
No, no.
Where did you go in the evacuation?
During the evacuation, we walked by foot, I think for 2 or 3 nights. We just kept on walking, and we saw a lot of dead bodies that just couldn't make it. And we arrived into another concentration camp that was called Gleiwitz. And I don't know how long, it must have been a day or 2 we spent in Gleiwitz.
Still people there?
Yes, and that's where I lost most of my friends that I was with Janina. Well, a couple of them from France. On the march to Gleiwitz, we lost each other, and I never saw them again. But they're in my mind constantly. I only hope that they're alive someplace. You know, we were good friends, you know. French, you know, French buddies, and des amis français. I don't know where they are. I'm still looking, but it hasn't worked so far. Maybe. So we were in Gleiwitz, and from Gleiwitz, that was in January, we took the train and we arrived in Oranienburg. Oranienburg was also a dreadful place. I mean, everything was disoriented because the Germans know that they were going to lose. So they tried to keep as many as they can. We slept outside. There was no food. There was no water, and it was just awful. From Oranienburg, I think we took a train and we arrived in Sachsenhausen, a camp by the name of Sachsenhausen. I cannot remember too well about Sachsenhausen. We must have spent a week in Sachsenhausen. In Sachsenhausen, we took a train and we arrived in a place that I found out was called Flossenbürg. That was, I think, middle of March. We arrived in Flossenbürg. Now, Flossenbürg was a granite mine. They used to cut stones, granite, where they used to make, you know, marble floors and things like that. These Jews, they had a very hard time. I found that out later, how difficult, how bad this mine was. But at the same time, they had a airplane factory not too far away. And I don't know how that happened, what got me talking. There was one capo there, and he was not Jewish, was German. And he asked me what my name is. And I said, my name is Erik Rosenzweig, and I speak German. I spoke German with a Munich accent. And he says he's also from Munich. And when I told him my name is Erik Rosenzweig, where did you live? I says, Rosenthalstraße. He said, did your parents have a department store? I says, yes. So that capo says, well, I was employed by your parents. I didn't say anything. I was not overwhelmed. I was already going close to 17 years old. But this man, instead of assigning me to the granite mine where it's impossible, there are no survivors there, he sent me to the night shift in the airplane factory. Now the difference in the night shift and the day shift you have to work. The night shift, the lights were out because we were Soviet planes, so they had to shut the lights. So the minute we got there, they shut the lights, we went to sleep. The following morning, we went back to camp. So that went on and on and on and on. And I had a good job there. You were allowed to get extra rations by working in the airplane factory. So that helped a little bit. And all of a sudden, things changed. We were beginning to get cigarettes. We knew that the Americans weren't too far away, so the Germans were a little bit lenient. Right now, I could have said it wouldn't help them any by being nice to us. But then, cigarette was a cigarette. I didn't smoke it then. I exchanged my cigarettes for bread. So that kept me going. And I think on April 16th, they evacuated Flossenbürg. Now, April 16th, as I know then, I didn't know then, that was the beginning of the Death March. We were taking a train for one day. We were in an open cattle car. And as I found out later on, that the British planes knew what that convoy was, that they were prisoners. So they did everything possible to slow it down. So they kept on shooting at the locomotive. When they kept on shooting the locomotive, all the Germans left. And we thought here we were free. So a lot of inborns jumped out of the cattle car and they scattered. I was too weak. I couldn't, I just stayed in a cattle car. That was number 3 saving. The hanging, the doctor, and staying in that cattle car. Because those who jumped out of the cattle car were rounded up by the SS. After the planes left, I saw them being shot in the head. I saw it. And they were smiling when they shot him. So the cattle car left again, and again it was bombed. So finally, they made us march on foot. That must have been April 17th till April 23rd. It was already April. It was a rainy season in Germany, cold. We marched and marched and marched. and people fell. And those who sat down, the minute I saw somebody sitting down, a few minutes later I heard like pop, pop, like a ping. I started to sit down, and two men and two inmates in front of me told me in Yiddish, "Don't sit down, they're shooting. Don't sit down." So I got up and I marched again, and I marched. Till one night we arrived in a little town that called Stamsried. I found that out now, the name of it. And they put us in a barn. When I went into the barn, me and another man, we saw a heap of straw. And I crawled under that heap of straw because it was warm and we were wet because of the rain. The other one sat in the middle of the barn. In the morning, the assessmen came, shot everybody in the barn. And I was sleeping under that straw with this other man. And they left, and we were left alone in that barn. When I got out of that barn, we were just like zombies. We couldn't understand the dead bodies and everything. A few minutes later, we saw some tanks passing by. I knew what a tank was, but I'll never forget, there was somebody sitting on top of the tank, had a deep helmet, and the tank had a star on it. So we heard right away, Americana, Americana, and we were saved. This fella and me under that barn.
The only ones from that march?
The only one. Well, there were other ones from another march, but the ones in that barn were all shot, except me and this other fellow. And this other fellow, I marched with somebody just now this past April, and this barn is still there. And this fellow said, oh, I remember this barn. I was in that barn with one fellow. I says, I was also in that barn with one fellow. That was him. We saw each other after 50 years. Lives now in California. He's a successful real estate man. Lost all his family. He's got nobody left. And this was the end of the Death March. But the Death March was like a long dirt road that lasted maybe a week, 10 days, and I saw people fall. When the Americans came at night, they couldn't see the dead bodies, so the tanks went over the dead body. You couldn't see it. There were hundreds of dead bodies on that Death March. And I went through that Death March in a luxurious bus. The roads were paved. But I looked right and left. 50 years back, there were bodies and bodies and bodies of Jews, just because they were Jews, nothing else.
What did you do at the point that the Americans came in?
When the Americans came in, well, the Americans came, we were liberated, we were just working like zombies. We were just working. I met 2 other German inmates. The Americans came, but we didn't know. We were free to do whatever we wanted. We spent the night sleeping someplace, I can't remember where. Then we started to get hungry, and we were walking on a square. All of a sudden, I saw a very burly man in a uniform, and he spoke a foreign language which we couldn't understand, which was English. And I remember he had a helmet with an eagle on top, and he spoke, and we couldn't understand. Then he mentioned by word, he says, eat, eat. Yes, yes, yes. He took us all 3 into a tavern. He says, come with us, like this. We followed him. We went into a restaurant. That restaurant was full of German people. He made the waiter tell the occupants of one table to get up immediately.
And you were still in your clothes?
We still had those clothes. And those people had to get up. The waiter put some white tablecloth on it. Gave us a fork and knife. And when I had this in my hand, I was a human being again. Now when I go to a restaurant now, I wouldn't eat if it doesn't have a tablecloth. And
at that point, did you follow the Americans out?
No, we stayed in Stamsried. Then there happened to be also French troops. And there's sent me, I don't know how I got there, to the French Red Cross. And I told them that I'm from Nice. I gave them my address. I told them my sister lives there. And they must have notified my sister, and they put me on the train. That was in April 24th or the 25th. And it took maybe 3-4 days by train. You know, went through all these bombed cities and back to Nice. I arrived in Nice with my striped uniform still.
With the uniform still on?
I had nothing else to wear. Had nothing else to wear. I was still shaven. And that's how I got to Nice.
Did you find your sister right away?
My sister picked me up.
She was at the train station?
That told her, the French Red Cross told her I was coming. And the first thing she asked who my brother is. I says, I don't know. I don't know. It's the first thing she asked. And then she says, she took me downtown. My mother was living downtown. My sister lived a little bit up the mountain. My mother lived in the city of Nice. She went down. I waited downstairs. My sister went up. And she said, there was somebody who would like to see you. And I went up. I saw my mother again. The first thing she asked, "Wo ist Siegfried?" That's it.
So now you're in Nice. Your sister has her children back?
She got her children back.
You said to me there was difficulty.
It was difficult for her. She had to fight for her children.
Now, what did they say to her? Why did they make her fight for them?
Because she couldn't find them.
They were hiding
They were hiding
her
the children. They were hiding the children.
These families wanted to keep them.
They wanted to keep them.
Who helped her?
I don't remember. I think she had some lawyers. I mean, she went to the police and things like that. She found how in her, I don't know, or I've forgotten, but she got the children back. She got all the children
And
back.
she survived with her husband?
She survived with her husband.
How is your mom at this point? How is she physically and after all she had been
Well,
through?
my mother, she tried to make the best out of it. You know, tried to make a living, and a mother at that age, how can she find a work? So, well, what can a Jew do? That's why Jews are always hated. They always find a way to make a living. She met Americans. She bought and sold cigarettes, and the profits she made, you know, she lived and she paid the rent, and that's what she did.
So she always found a way.
That was her means of making a living. How else could she make a living? So when I came back, she was selling cigarettes to a furrier in Monte Carlo, because my mother used to buy cigarettes in Nice, took a train to Monte Carlo, and sold them from store to store. There she met a client of her who bought the cigarettes from her, who is a furrier. So one day she told this man, look, my son, I have a son, he just came back from Auschwitz, maybe you can teach him a trade. So he said, okay, come on. So I took a train every morning from Nice to Monte Carlo, which is about 45 minutes or something by train. I went to Monte Carlo, and I learned how to be a furrier. I worked there for about till 1948. I knew how to do fur cutting, cleaning, and things like that. I knew a little bit. I wasn't experienced in it. But then my mother said she had a sister living in New York before the war still. And they sent us the papers, and we came to America in April 1948.
Do you remember the name of the ship?
No. Oh yeah, the name of the ship, we went high class. We came with the Queen Elizabeth. You know, we went to London first, and from London we took the Queen Elizabeth to New York.
Who helped you to get the tickets?
My sister in Zurich.
She paid for it. You, Jewish organizations did not help you at this point?
No, my sister.
So
She had a very smart husband, and he knew how to make money.
Okay, we'll continue on the next tape.
Okay.
Hmm. 1995. Before we discuss America, you said you had a few things you wanted to talk about during the Death March.
that was before just at the beginning of the Death March, is that when we left, when Janina was evacuated in January, we arrived in that camp called Gleiwitz. Gleiwitz was a regular concentration camp. I didn't know about that. But all the camps throughout Poland were converging into Gleiwitz. There was such an influx of inmates, it was undescribable. Barracks that held 100 people held 1,000 people. People were in the courtyard, they didn't know, they couldn't move. And the thing that I will never forget, that the SS men, just for the whimper, just took out their pistol and just kept on shooting right into the crowd. And this is the things that I'm having nightmares of sometimes. How can people do something like this? But that's how it was. When we left Gleiwitz, they put us on a cattle car again. But that cattle car was not a closed cattle car, it was an open cattle car. In that cattle car, there was room maybe for 60 people standing up. They put 100 in there standing up. That means if somebody wants to sit down, you can't sit down. You were close one to another. And that's how the cattle car left. And it started to snow. The snow came on top of us. We were covered with snow. We had nothing to drink. So we took the snow, we put it in our mouth. We arrived in different concentration camps. There was no room, so the cattle car kept on going. From Poland, we got into Czechoslovakia, to Theresienstadt. Theresienstadt was full also. It was either full or it was already closed. So the cattle car kept on moving. Meanwhile, there were over 100 people standing up. Some of them died standing up. So when we know that somebody died, we took them, tossed them overboard. What could we do? The thing that I want to get off my chest, when we had a little bit more room to sit down, I was so weak I sat down. But I sat down at somebody that fell, and he was alive, and I sat on top of his face. And he begged me to let him to get up. He wanted to breathe. I couldn't get up. I had no strength to get up. I couldn't get up. And he died under me. So I feel like sometimes I killed him. You know, Catholics go to a priest and confess to him. I don't know who to go to. Who can help me? And I'm having nightmares about that. I think about him screaming, let me up, let me up. I couldn't let him up. I couldn't get up. Just couldn't get up. And he died. One day he didn't move. So he kept on biting on my pants underneath. So I punched him, so he should leave me alone. It was either him or me, or both of us. That's the worst part, and that I got to live with, always. I haven't told anybody yet. So maybe somebody will realize how hard it was.
And how hard it is.
And how hard it is, and it still is. I can be in the business, I can be busy, I talk to a customer, making a big deal, small deal, and all of a sudden, in the middle of a conversation, talking with somebody overseas, all of a sudden I see this face, just like that.
It doesn't leave you.
No, it doesn't leave. I can be in Atlantic City playing blackjack. All of a sudden, the dealer asks me, what are you going to do? I'm not doing anything. I'm thinking about that. All of a sudden, it's just, everything disappears and this pops up. And that's the worst thing. That, besides what they did to my parents, to my brother and to my father, I'm alive. I survived.
What do you know about your father? We didn't discuss
No,
that.
about my father, I knew very, very little. My father was separated, and he did not live home. I only know that in the morning, he rang the bell downstairs. My mother dressed me, took him downstairs, and he took me to a park, to an amusement park, and then at night he brought me home again, and that was it.
But you don't know his life during the war? What happened
No,
to him?
he moved back to Poland, and I knew by my older brothers and sisters that he had a business there. He was a linen distributor, and they kept on corresponding with him. My two brothers went to visit him, and they sent him a letter one day, and the letter came back, address unknown.
So you think he
That
also
was
died?
that was in 1942. They got a letter.
What town did he? Oh, Katowice.
In Katowice. So we knew. Well, in Katowice they killed 95%. I mean, out of 3.5 million, only 300,000 survived. So not many Polish survivors.
Right, right.
So my father perished in Auschwitz from Poland.
Right, definitely. And now we bring you with these memories to America.
I brought these memories to America, but I wasn't thinking about that. Not at all. I was 20, I was young, liked to go out, have a good time. But after the war, I got so used to see GIs in Nice that I wanted to be a soldier in such a bad way. So when I got to America, I had a little trade as a furrier, but it was very difficult to get a job as a furrier. The union was very difficult, and I had to start from the bottom up, start sweeping floors. I didn't want to do that. So I did the next best thing. Well, not next best thing. I joined the American Army. I went to the American Army. I signed up for 3 years. After about a year and a half, I had enough. I didn't want to, but what else can I do? I got a year and a half more to go. So a law came that if you join the reserves, you can be discharged. That means in the reserves, you have to go for lectures once a week. Oh, no, pardon me, once a month. So I went, I got discharged in January 1950, and I went to the active reserves. And lo and behold, in December 1950, Korean War starts. I'm the first one to be called in. So I was supposed to go to Korea, but in the camp that I was in Fort Dix, we had exercises before. When they had an exercise there, I had a little accident. I fell off a truck and I hurt my back. So I didn't go to Korea. I stayed in Fort Dix until I got discharged again, because they didn't need me. Since I was in the reserves, I got discharged from the reserves, and I got out.
You finished in 1952?
I finished in 1951, I finished
51.
the Army.
Because you married in 1952?
I married in 1952.
Two?
That's also a story. My brother-in-law in Switzerland, I went to Switzerland to visit my mother. She still lived there. And then when I went back to America, my brother-in-law told me that he has an uncle living in New York. They're very nice people. I should come to see him. So when I went back to New York, I was all by myself when I got discharged. I mean, I did have family. I had a cousin. I stayed with my cousin. One night, I called up this uncle, and I said, I'm your nephew's brother-in-law from Switzerland. And it was Friday night. They invited me for Friday night. Very Orthodox people. I got there. I met them. I sat down at the table with 3 young ladies, 3 young girls. I started to go out with the oldest one. Not right away, maybe a couple of months later. Because every time I came to New York on leave from the Army, they invited me to come over. So I got friendly with the oldest one. We started to go out, and
that's who you met?
One day I proposed to her.
And her name?
It was Judith Schaefer. But the parents did not want to me get married because I was in the Army. All right. Then the other reason says, well, they told Judy that, what are you going to do? A young refugee doesn't have any job, doesn't have anything, you know. But we got married anyway.
When did you get married?
1952, in June the 8th.
In New York?
In New York. So her father, Judy's father, had a small electrical store. And he took me into the business. And we started to make one small product. And I went on the road, starting to sell that product, and I started to move. Then I added some other lines to it and so forth. And it wasn't doing so good. And one day I decided maybe I would like to buy his share, to buy him out. So he gave Judy as a present 50%. I had to buy my 50%. I found a way to buy it, and I worked very hard, and I built the business from small, very small business to a large business. It's a big factory. We got 25 employees now, and we have salesmen. We sell all over the world, and that's it.
And children?
The children came. Vicky came. Vicky's around 36 now. She has 3 children of her own living in Michigan. Then Steve, my son, he is 31 or 32.
Where does he live?
He lives in Hempstead.
Vicky's full name and her husband's name, maybe?
Vicky's Vicky Jacks, and her husband is Harold Jacks. And then the youngest one, which is Barbara. She has 2 children.
And she's married to?
She's married to Martin Lehman. And she has 2 children.
And she has 2 children. Can you name your grandchildren for us?
Oh, okay. From Vicky, I have Brian. He had bar mitzvah a year and a half ago. Then David, he had bar mitzvah last year. And then 9 is Jessica. And then from Barbara, I have Rachel. She is 5. And Evan is going to be 4.
Nice family.
So that's it.
Let's close with just a thought on why you decided to do this tape at this time.
Well, this tape, I found out through Steven Spielberg that he wants to make this tape that future generation should know what different people, I mean, there's more interviews than mine, but they should know whatever interviews they're going to show schools and colleges, what happened in 1945, 1940, the suffering the Jewish people in this generation.
I know you also made a documentary.
I did make a documentary last year, tracing my life as a child in France, all the way to the concentration camp in Paris, and back to America again.
What was the name of the film?
The name was, in French, was called France la honte, which is France, the shame, because the documentary was named because the French never wanted to acknowledge that there ever was a concentration camp in Paris. 10, 15 years ago, I was numerous times in Paris, and I asked the concierge of any hotel, where is Drancy? I always got a negative answer. I was in one hotel where Drancy was only 1 subway stop away from this hotel, and nobody ever told me. And this is why I made the documentary, to let the French people aware what did happen in France in 1940, 1942.
Well,
that the French were accomplices in the German persecution of the Jews.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you for telling us your story as well.
You're welcome.
It's important to us.
You're welcome. Again.
Okay, could you tell us about this picture?
Yes, depicting on the left is my sister Erna, from living now in Israel. Next to him is my brother Siegfried, who passed away in Auschwitz. In back of my brother is my father. Down below sitting is my mother Sarah. Behind my mother is my older sister Frida. And the little boy there is my brother Rosen.
And when was this taken?
That was taken around 1926 in Munich, Germany.
Thank you. Tell us about this one.
This one is a picture of my parents holding me when I was about, I would say, 2 months old or 3 months old in 1928 in Munich.
Your mother on the left?
And my mother's on the left and my father's on the right.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
The picture depicting my brother, my middle brother on the left.
His name?
Rosen, and myself. I was there maybe 4 years old in Munich around 1932.
Do you know where you were?
No, I can't remember.
Okay.
Should I go get the door?
Don't, wait, hold it. Don't touch it.
Here they are.
Tell us about it.
This is me at the age of 2 or 2.5 at around 1931 in Munich.
Thank you. Go ahead.
This picture is taken in Tel Aviv, Israel in 1935. I was then 7 years old. On my left is my brother Rosen. Next to him is my deceased brother Siegfried and I.
And I think we should say how you got all these pictures.
These pictures were saved by my mother.
Who was in hiding with them?
Who was in hiding.
Thank you. Please.
This picture are the 5 children of my sister Ernie, or Erna, who had a difficult time retrieving them after the war because each child was hidden in a separate Christian family who were very reluctant to give them up.
This was, they were hidden in Nice.
They were hidden in Nice, yes.
This was taken before they went into hiding?
This was taken after they went into hiding. They were much smaller.
Okay, thank you. Please.
This picture is taken in Nice in 1941 with my mother, Sarah.
In
I was around, I would say, 10 years old.
In the street?
In the street, yes.
What's the name of that?
The Promenade des Anglais.
Right, in Nice.
In Nice.
Thank you. Go ahead.
This picture is of me after my return from Auschwitz about, I would say, 1 or 2 months after the liberation. I still have a little bit of crew cut.
Around June 1945?
Around June 1945,
In
yes.
Nice?
In Nice.
Go ahead.
This is a identity card issued by the by a committee of former French deported, showing that I was in a concentration camp in, from 1943 to 1945.
What does it list on the right?
It lists on the right the 2 camps that I was in. One of the 2 camps, Auschwitz and Oranienburg.
And it says that it was in May 10th, 1943.
That I was in those camps from 1943 to 1945.
Fine. Okay. 90. Go ahead.
This picture was taken in Nice in 1947, and I was then 17 years old, and I regained some of my health and strength.
You were about 19 in 1947.
19, yes, 19, I'm so sorry.
Still in Nice?
Still in Nice, yes. He was handsome.
Go ahead.
This is a picture of my brother Rosen, taken in 1947 in Tel Aviv, Israel.
He was living there at that time?
He was living there at that time.
He's the one that stayed in Israel?
It's the one that stayed, and at the time he was a policeman in the British Army.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, on the left is my son Stephen. Myself next to him. Next to me is my wife Judith. In back of my wife is my grandson Brian. And next to Brian is his father Harold Jacks. In front of his father is my daughter Vicky
The red suit.
in the red suit, and in front of my daughter Vicky is her daughter Jessica, and in back of my daughter Vicky is my other grandson David, and on the left you have my
On the right.
on the right my daughter Barbara. Behind her is her husband Martin, and in front are their two children, Rachel and Evan.
This was taken where?
This was taken, I would say, about a month ago in Muskegon, Michigan, at my grandson's David's bar mitzvah.
Mazel tov.
Thank you.
See videos, you know, the videos that you see somebody take them. You know, that's what you do. They come with
Mr. Rosen, before you
camera.
introduce your family, could you tell us about that kerchief?
Yeah, this kerchief my mother was wearing while she was in hiding, not really in hiding, but she wore this around her neck so that people would think that, that she's a French sympathizer and not Jewish.
Did she have a false name at that time?
No, no.
She kept her own name.
She wore this, and she wore a cross on around her neck.
So this was from the 1940s of Pétain.
This was 1940 Pétain, yes.
Okay, thank you. Would you introduce your family to us?
Yes. Right to my left is Judith, my wife Judith, and holding her is my granddaughter Rachel. Next to Rachel we have Evan. Next to Evan is my daughter Barbara, and her husband and son-in-law Marty.
Thank you all for being with us and sharing this day with us. Appreciate it.
Welcome.